that time of year.
It's that time of year.
It is that time.
The most magical time of year.
The most magical time of the year. The magical time where my wallet is empty and my stomach is too full.
Not if you play your cards right. You know, your wallet's not going to be that empty, but
I don't know. I don't know about you. I spend a lot more money between the months of November and December than I do probably the next 4 months, January or April. Really, I mean, it's there's a lot of cash leaving, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not even all just gifts or stuff. It's just the idea of having family over for dinners, and you're buying big meals, and you're buying whole turkeys instead of turkey breasts. And,
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I get it.
So it's one of those things. But
did you set up a e-holiday club this year?
Did I set up?
Shameless plug.
I actually do have an e-holiday club. I should put more into it every out of every pay.
Yeah.
I find that I sort of stopped adjusting it a couple of years back, and I really should probably bump it up a little bit.
Yeah.
You have an e-holiday?
No, I have not jumped on that bandwagon, but yeah, I probably should.
Yeah.
It's the same boat as you. Yeah, I do more at the end of the year.
So you're ragging on me, but meanwhile,
well, you know,
your own house is not in order. See, that's so. No, so it's, I mean, holiday season and there's all sorts of stuff to talk about, but because of the spending, you brought up a really good point, which was, we've given some advice on the show before regarding ways to budget.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about envelopes, and we've talked about the 50-30-20 rule. And you made a good point the other day when you said that, we don't always go in depth on some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided today we're going to talk more in depth about the 50-30-20 rule, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So remind everybody what it is.
So it's a budgeting technique that you take 50% of your after-tax income that should go into your go towards your needs. 30% should go towards your wants, and 20% should go towards long-term savings.
Okay. So now when you say long-term savings, is it savings, or is it just like, does that mean my 401k and my IRAs, or does that mean just a savings account? Or
so it depends on what article you read.
Okay.
So some say it's for retirement. So that's your 401k, your IRAs, and others say that your emergency fund is looped into that too. Others say that your emergency fund is part of your needs,
Okay.
But yeah, I would tend to say long-term retirement savings. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and do like you suggested. Let's really delve into this and break this down a little bit, because it's easy to say 50% for your needs, 30% for your wants, and 20% for your savings. But what is a need?
Yeah.
Right. And are your needs the same as my needs? What are my needs, Jeff?
What are your needs? What do you need, Drew? Yeah, no, it's different for everyone, definitely. And depends on your lifestyle and where you live. And I mean, there's lots of factors. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think I would argue that one of the main needs that most people would say is a place to live. You need a roof over your head.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
But you may not necessarily need a $427,000 house.
No, that might be your want.
Yeah. Which incidentally is now, I think, the latest figure in terms of the average home price in the United States.
So ridiculous. That is so ridiculous.
I just can't imagine the average home price in the U.S. being $427,000.
Yeah.
Just crazy. But so a roof over your head. Do you need 3 roofs over your head if you have? I don't know.
Yeah. Right.
And I guess that depends on your family size, right? So you have a bit of an addition to the family.
Yes, I do.
I mean, is your living situation going to be good for a while?
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, if I have another child, that may be a little different story. But yeah, for now, then yeah, we're good with our living situation space wise. Yeah.
Right. But to your point, if your family is expanding and suddenly you have a 3-bedroom house and you've got 3 kids and they can't bunk up together, things like that.
Sure. Yeah.
There comes a point where maybe you do need to reassess that. Maybe renting isn't for you. Maybe you do need to look at a house. Conversely, if you are a couple that maybe is becoming empty nesters, right?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Maybe you no longer need the house that you needed 25 or 30 years ago.
Yeah, that's becoming more and more common. People don't want to, heat their house, a giant house that's only 2 people in anymore, or they don't need that much space anymore. Yeah.
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 Sometimes it's even the amenities of the house, like, it was really great having a swimming pool whenever the kids were at home and having pool parties and stuff. But now it's just a nightmare to clean it all the time. And I have to pay to heat it, and I have to maintain it, and I have to put chemicals in it, and it's an insurance issue, and maybe that's the kind of stuff that you don't necessarily need either.
Or you're following your kids. Maybe they've moved away, and they have kids now, and you want to be close to your grandkids. So you're just downsizing just because the necessity to move.
Yeah. I mean, you make a good point. I don't think that a lot of people live the way that like my grandparents did, and even my parents. A lot of times, once your grandparents sort of settled in a place, a lot of families, they never moved more than 50 miles away from one another.
And around here, they didn't move more than 50 yards away from each other. I mean, my grandmother and grandfather, they live right next to their parents, and then they lived right next to my grandfather's brother.
Yeah,
they were like family compounds back in the day, pretty much.
Yeah, you had the family estates, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
So, but these days, I mean, people move across the country for a job.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I got to get my little history dig in here, but like, but I think about it sometimes whenever we're traveling, like if I'm traveling, or me and my wife are going someplace, and I think to myself, she has family in Kansas.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I think to myself at times that I can be in Kansas at 8:00 in the morning, and then I can be back in Pennsylvania at 3 p.m.
Yeah.
And 100 years ago, even, that would have been a several-day journey.
Oh, yeah.
200 years ago, that would have taken months.
Right.
And yet we can do it inside of a day now. Right. So, there's a lot of people that have moved simply because they find a good job opportunity. They'll move across the country, and they'll just fly home.
Yeah. Even commutes to jobs are getting, longer and longer. It's nothing for, I think the average is like 45 minutes or an hour or something like that is like the average commute to a job now or something like
that. Yeah. And that's a really, really good time to listen to podcasts.
It sure is.
Just saying. Because you got time, when you're sitting on the highway, you can either jam out to the same old music that you've heard 100 times, or you can listen to a podcast. So what other needs would you say other than housing? I mean, you really can think about what your housing needs are in terms of renting versus owning and all that kind of stuff. But what other needs would you, what else would you put in that bucket?
Transportation is another good one. So you need to be able to get to your job. But there could be a little gray area with that too. So you may need a car. You may not need a car that costs the same as your annual salary.
Yes.
So that could be put into a want.
Well, and really that comes down to, I think it's a personal preference, but it's also sort of a who am I trying to impress?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people that own high-end vehicles and things like that because they love them, and because they're just a car guy or a car girl, and they just really like that stuff. But there is a significant percentage of those people who own those cars because they think that the person sitting behind them on the highway, or to the left of them or right of them, or when they pull into their parking lot at work, other people are impressed by that car.
Right.
More so than they are.
Right.
So are you owning that car to impress, or are you owning that car for transportation?
Yeah.
Is the question.
Yeah.
And it also, to your point, I think too, it depends on where you live. If you live in a major city, maybe you don't need a car.
Yeah,
Maybe you can get by on buses and subways and trains, and if you live in the suburbs, you kind of need to have a car.
Yeah. And you may be able to reallocate some of that money that would have gone towards a fancy car, if you can afford it. If you're taking a bus every day and it's costing you, I don't know, $50 a week, you're not paying that in gas and insurance and all that kind of stuff. So maybe you put that money that would have gone towards that stuff into maybe a little better house, or another need life insurance, that maybe you don't have life insurance, and now you can afford life insurance, something like that.
Yeah, you definitely got to weigh it out in terms of nothing is free. Right. It's pretty rare to find something in life that is truly free. You're usually offsetting one cost with another. The question is it cheaper to have the car and have the some people like the freedom of a car. The freedom, the car gives you the ability to come and go as you please. You don't got to wait for the train to arrive. You don't got to check the bus schedule.
Sure.
You don't got to depend on other people to bum a ride off of them, on your way home.
Yeah.
So a car definitely gives you freedom as well. But again, if bigger cities, things like that, you might be paying hundreds of dollars a month just to park it.
I was just gonna say, yeah, parking. That's a big one. Yeah.
And if you drive it once a month and you're paying several $100s to park it in a parking space, is it really worth it?
Yeah.
I don't know. Only you can decide.
Yeah,
but, I think you made a good point when we started sort of talking about this before we started this conversation, right? Was the idea that there's sometimes some gray area in terms of what is a need and what is a want.
Big time, yeah.
Things like that,
right.
So let's stick with needs, though, for the time being. So I would argue food.
Food, definitely.
You got to eat.
Yep.
Again, do you have to eat at high-end restaurants? Not necessarily, well, even grocery stores and things.
The restaurant, that would be a want for most people, because you don't need to eat out. You can make your own food at home.
Some people can.
Some people can't.
Okay, yeah.
So, all right. So.
I can. You can, I believe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely. But I definitely know people in my life that have a difficult time boiling an egg.
Okay.
So, not many. I mean, that's pretty simple. But the point is, not everybody's a chef, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes, and sometimes too, if you're single, it's sort of hit or miss as to whether or not it's cheaper to bring in like a pizza and make 2 or 3 meals out of that one pizza.
Yeah.
As opposed to making a dinner. It's tough to cook for one.
It is. Yeah. And that was, I remember my grandmother was like that. It's hard to go to the deli or, the grocery store and say, I need 3 pieces of cheese,
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I would like an 1/8 of a pound of ham.
Right.
Right. It's not.
You don't buy a chicken breast by the single usually,
Right.
So yeah, I understand that completely.
Yeah. So in some cases it might be, but it also comes down to your health then too. If you're eating fast food all the time, we all know that as tasty as it might be, it's not the best for your health in most cases to eat fast food all the time.
Yeah. And a home cooked meal of ramen 6 nights a week does not constitute as a healthy meal.
There's a lot of sodium in there. Yeah. Yeah. Your blood pressure is going to take a hit, for sure, if you're doing that. Yeah. And it also, to that point kind of depends maybe a little bit on your age and your overall health going into that too.
Sure.
If you're younger, you're a college student, the conceit is, I lived on ramen for 2 or 3 years while I was in college, right? Nuking it in my dorm microwave or something like that. But when you're 20, you can sort of, I'm not saying that you should, but you can absorb more blows to your health usually than if you're 75, right? So if you're 75, you probably shouldn't be doing ramen every day. Yeah. Whereas if you're 20, maybe you can get away with that a little more often.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that brings up the health insurance. That's another need that you need.
Yeah.
But maybe that looks different for someone who is 60 versus someone who's 20, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, health insurance is definitely one of those hot button issues, I think, not for a lot of people. And I think the U.S. is really one of the only countries that ties health insurance so closely to your employer.
Yeah.
Most other countries, it's either like in the UK, it's like United Healthcare, where it's like
it's universal type
universal
thing.
Stuff,
Yeah.
Where it's and in other countries, even if it's private, you're paying for that insurance sort of separate.
Yeah.
In the US, I think that there's an argument that there are a lot of people who are working past retirement age, or staying in jobs that are maybe less fulfilling for them, simply because of needing to be able to afford health insurance.
Yeah, yeah, that's really common with spouses that are have a pretty big age gap too. You know, you might have your wife may be, 10 years younger than you, but you have to work to keep her health insurance,
Yeah.
That's
That's
a big
a
one.
good point. That also comes into play with some things, sometimes spouses, one spouse is holding all the health insurance for the family, whereas the other, and the other spouse doesn't have any. So then that becomes a question of, well, can if I'm the healthcare holder for my whole family, now I have that much extra pressure on the fact that I can't lose my job. I can't move on. I can't do anything else.
Oh yeah.
And on the other side of it, the spouse that doesn't have the healthcare for themselves, if there's a personal conflict in the home or something like that, that puts pressure on them to try, like, well, now I got to make this work because I can't, handle things on my own because, so healthcare is definitely a need, but it's a complicated need, I would argue.
Yeah, I'd have to agree, definitely.
So that's pretty much, I think, I don't know if we missed anything. I mean, you need a roof over your head. You need to be able to stay healthy. And that includes being able to eat, and get to and from where you need to go. Ideally your job, most likely, because you got to have money to pay for all this other stuff.
Yeah, right. The only other thing would be utilities, but that's kind of looped into your living situation. But again, there could be gray areas there. Do you need the highest speed internet, or do you need the unlimited cell phone bill or plan? Is that a need or is that a want?
Yeah, you make a good point. I would say things like water is a need.
It's a need.
That's a utility.
Water, electricity, gas, those are all
if you've ever had your water shut off for more than a few hours, you know how frustrating that can be.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people realize sometimes just how often they turn on the faucet until you can't. Whether it's taking a shower, washing your hands, filling up a bucket, cleaning the stovetop, washing clothes.
I know how I feel if I turn on the sink and have brown water because they're doing sewer work or something like that. And I can't, I can't do the laundry, or I can't take a shower or boil water or whatever, So I not having it at all. Yeah. I would not want that at all. Yeah.
Same thing I would argue with electricity.
Yeah.
I mean, in these days, with the way our technology is and the way that our houses run and the way that our society runs, quite frankly, if you don't have lights and you don't have electricity, it's hard. It's definitely hard. There's very few people out there that can get by on candlelight and waking up at dawn.
Yeah.
Especially when dawn changes every couple of months. I'm still sore over daylight savings time. Sorry. So those, but
there's ways to get around that too. Solar power now. I've never looked into it, but some people do solar power to, offset that cost. And
I mean, you can definitely try to live off the grid if, possibly, but sometimes that also requires having enough money to invest in that technology up front.
Yeah,
you might have to have a couple, and when I say a couple, I mean in the 5 figures of thousands of dollars to be able to buy house batteries and solar panels and things like that. But if you can afford to, you might offset some of that cost down the road because you're not paying for electricity anymore.
Yeah.
But to circle back to your point about internet, you're absolutely right. Some people absolutely need to have high-speed internet. Maybe they work from home. Maybe there's some legitimate reason for needing that high-speed internet. And then some people who, if all you're doing is using the internet to check Facebook or something like that, maybe you do it on your phone. If you have a data plan, and just forego the home internet.
Yeah. Well, and now we have, everything's connected to the internet too. So everything's eating up more bandwidth than ever,
including your refrigerator. And
it's ridiculous.
I
I was online the other day looking at just Alexa connected devices, and they have microwaves now that are Alexa connected. It's ridiculous.
Why?
I don't know. Should have clicked on it and saw what the actual integration was, but it's like whatever they can stick, Alexa in, they're going to try to stick Alexa.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm a geek. I fully admit it. I'm a card-carrying member of the technology crew, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But even I think that there's a limit to some of the stuff, like, why do you need it in your microwave?
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, even in the fridge, I don't need to look in my fridge without opening it.
Yeah, the little indicator on the door that tells me that the water filter is due to be replaced is enough. I don't need a notification sent to my phone, right?
Yeah.
Washers and dryers I can kind of get behind a little bit, because sometimes washers and dryers are in the basement, and if you want a notification saying that like your laundry's done or the cycle's over,
just know how long it takes. I mean, if your laundry usually takes 45 minutes, it's going to always take 45 minutes.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair. You win. I'll give you that one. I was also thinking a little bit about kids. We live in the north, and starting around this time of year and going through the winter, you're going to start to see up north in the northern states here snow days and things like that. And a lot of schools back during COVID started issuing iPads and laptops for their students, and then they would have at-home work days, right, rather than a snow day.
Right.
But if your family doesn't have high-speed internet, then I don't know how that works for those kids.
Yeah, I think some communities have like subsidized internet for those kind of situations. Like you'll get like hotspots from like your local your city, But I don't know exactly how that works. I don't know, but
yeah, that's quite possible. But it does, it's not always just the work from home folks or the personal use of internet. Sometimes it's providing internet for other reasons, I guess.
Yeah.
Cell phones, same deal. I think a cell phone is a borderline need these days, because finding a landline is difficult.
Yeah.
And if you do find one, they're usually pretty expensive. But to your point, do you need to have the highest data plan, the most perks, all that kind of stuff, or would a basic, one of those companies like Mint Mobile, or what do you use?
I use Consumer Cellular, which is built on AT&T. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, some of those, maybe that's enough.
Yeah.
Maybe that's all you really need.
Yeah. I never had a problem.
Hint, hint. Okay. So what other wants?
Some wants.
Yeah.
Okay. So memberships to things, fancy clothing, subscriptions. Yes, online subscriptions. We keep coming back to that somehow. Cable TV, furniture, vacations, hobbies, and eating out.
So, so I want to touch on the whole vacations thing, because here's the thing. Vacations, I think that there's been a real push in recent years from a lot of sort of avenues, a lot of points, mental health experts, things like that, saying that in the U.S. we kind of work ourselves into the grave, especially when you compare to other countries in terms of how much holiday time we get and vacation time we get, that sort of thing. But conversely, a vacation does not necessarily, we've been sold this idea through advertising a lot that a vacation is not a vacation unless you're on a cruise or you're traveling to some Mediterranean beach or you're in the Caribbean or something like that. Like, a vacation can be spent at home or near home and still give you that mental recharge you need.
Oh, yeah.
Without necessarily having to spend $4,000 to go on vacation.
Definitely. Yeah. My wife and I mean, camping, that's our vacation a lot of times. And, that could be really cheap.
Yeah. Where do you usually camp? Do you do the tent, or do you do like a camper?
We do both. I have a camper, but we also like the simplicity of tent camping too. So yeah, it depends.
So I think that's the thing is don't say, well, because I don't have a whole lot of extra money, I can't afford to go on vacation. Like, there's this stigma of like, oh, you want a vacation, but you don't have any money.
Yeah.
You can still take a vacation. Just don't, you can find other ways to do it that are more cost effective.
You and your wife like going on day trips,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
It's another great way to do a vacation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Come home at the end of the day and sleep in your own bed and don't have to worry about a hotel, and you go out in the other direction the next day.
Yeah. Or even if you end up with one night in some city and then come back the next day, but you can make 2 days out of it and still only have to spend one night in one hotel.
Yeah, you're still saving money. Yeah.
What else did you say? You said vacations. You said eating out. You said hobbies. Well, yeah, we've talked subscriptions to death, but
Yeah.
I mean, here's what I would say: check your subscriptions once in a while. Make sure you're still using them.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of a subscription that is like that would be a need, and I can't think of any.
Yeah, I mean, gym memberships are a really big one because everybody says, "Well, that's for my health," and that's fine.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of exercise you can do by just walking out your front door and taking a run or riding a bike.
That's true. Yeah.
Going to the public park and playing tennis or pickleball or something like that. You don't have to be necessarily a gym member.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit costly up front, but buy your own equipment, that way you have it. You don't have to go to the gym.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes if you're renting stuff, sure.
Yeah. I just bought a treadmill for my wife for like $100, and in the wintertime, now she can walk on the inside the house and not have to worry about going outside. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're looking to do stuff like that on a lower expense too, I mean, there's no shame in things like Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace or eBay.
Craigslist, is that still around?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm showing my age. Maybe. I honestly have no idea.
I don't know.
But that was the OG online marketplace, right? Flea market.
Yeah.
Especially things like treadmills. I think you could argue that a lot of people buy treadmills, use them like 5 times, and then they become a glorified coat rack.
Yeah, it's like the gym membership, right?
Yeah. So if you're buying a used treadmill, you're probably buying a like new treadmill.
Yeah. True.
Okay, so let's touch a little bit on the whole savings aspect here, right? So that's our last 20%, right? 20% is savings, and you said that some people argue that that's your long-term retirement savings, like your IRAs and your 401ks and things. Other people sort of lump general savings into that.
Yeah.
Now, I know I personally couldn't necessarily afford to take 20% of my paycheck and put it solely to savings, right?
Yeah.
I'd love to. But
or you may be able to do it, a couple of months out of the year, and not consistently.
Yeah. So I think the argument that I would make is that it's kind of like exercise and the whole gym membership thing. If someone says to you, you have to exercise 5 days a week, and you say, well, listen, my job or my kids or my social life or my whatever doesn't allow me to do 5 days a week, I could only do 3. That doesn't mean you do 0.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like an all or nothing. Like, well, I have to do 5 days a week, but since I can't do 5, I'm just going to do none.
Yeah.
Right. So now that's what I do. No, I'm kidding. But I think the same applies to savings. If you can't do 20%, that doesn't mean you don't do anything.
Yeah. Do
what you can.
Yeah.
Right. Even if it's 5%, right. It's better than 0.
Yeah. And that's a good way, segue into, the 50-30-20 rule, though it's called a rule, it's not really a rule. It's a method. It's I don't know what you want to call it, but like there's wiggle room. You don't have to, it's not always 50-30-20. If you can only do, like you said, 10, do 10 and your needs may go up by 10% then,
It's like Barbosa with the Pirates Code. They're more like guidelines.
Yeah,
actual rules.
Yes, that's perfect. That's perfect. Yes. They're guidelines. Because there's other methods, other than the 50-30-20, and I didn't know about these, but so there's the 70-20-10, which is 70% allocated to your living expenses, 20 to savings and investments, and then 10 to donations. We didn't talk about donations at all, but a lot of people, they donate, a good chunk of their income to, some charitable, something.
I mean, if you're a devoutly religious person, a lot of people have to, I was just say have to, they choose to allocate money toward tithing and things like that for their church or their synagogue or whatever, So yeah, absolutely.
Right. 40-30-20-10. They're getting longer and longer.
Yeah.
But same premise, 40 for needs, 30 for wants, 20 for savings, and 10 for donations. You go the other way, 80-20. 20% to savings and 80% to everything else. So if you kind of just want to consolidate and lump two of those categories together, you can. 60-40, 60 for your fixed expenses, insurance, mortgage, things like that. And then 40 goes to anything outside of your normal. So things that you are one-offs. you know that you would maybe consider your emergency fund. So you need your hot water blows and you need a hot water tank. Okay, well, 40% goes to that.
Yeah. And you know, sometimes you have one-offs that are not necessarily even stuff. I mean, that's a big one, but even one-offs like holiday spending,
Yeah.
you know, to kind of bring this full circle.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you don't spend as much money buying gifts for people and stuff as you do around this time of year in April.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Or vacations, you know, sometimes you're spending a little more heavily when you go on vacation, you actually do get to take a trip somewhere. A lot of times it's, we're on vacation, right? How many times do you hear that people say like, you know, I don't know if I should buy that. We're on vacation.
Right.
Just get it. You know, it's fine, you know. So those kinds of one-offs too, like build that into your budget a little bit.
Insurance is another one, like auto insurance. I tend to pay once a year because I usually get a little bit better rate if I pay once away
off or something. Yeah.
You know, so that's a one-off that, you know, kind of a one-off. I know I'm going to have it, you know, every single year, but I don't have to allocate that money every month, you know, towards it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure that as we get ready to enter into yet another new year, you know, we're going to be talking, you know, soon about things like taxes and things like that. And, you know, a lot of people use their tax return for things like their annual insurance bill for their auto insurance or things like that. You know, they sort of know that money's coming from their refund. So they'll just sort of time it out. And when they get their refund, they'll pay their auto insurance.
Yeah.
You could also use holiday clubs and things like it. Just because it's called a holiday club doesn't mean you can't use it for other purposes.
That's true. Yeah.
You could open up a holiday club and then sock a little bit of money away every month. And then if you know that, you know, you're going to have those things coming due in October, November timeframe, you know, use a holiday club for that kind of thing. You know, use it for the purpose you need it for rather than what it's named for.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that.
Yeah.
Some banks and credit unions and stuff will let you open those kinds of clubs and let you choose your disbursement date. It's not as common. Usually it's one of those things where holiday clubs get dispersed around October-ish timeframe.
Right.
But there are organizations out there that will let you choose your disbursement date. So you could use that kind of a club for that. Okay. You know, and then kind of say, hey, listen, I want my disbursement in March instead. Why not?
Yeah.
You know. Yeah, I think this is a good conversation. I think this is definitely something that I hope maybe frees people up to understanding that, you know, you shouldn't just abandon the idea of a budget if you can't strictly follow a particular regimen or a particular ratio.
Yeah, it's not an all or nothing.
Yeah. You know, just do what you can, and budgeting is definitely helpful, and especially if you can sock a little money away, like you said, for that sort of like want spending, that kind of stuff. You know, like that special needs spending. It makes it a lot easier to spend it because you kind of know that's what it's for. You know, there isn't that little thing in the back of your head going, well, I should be buying something else, but I'm going to buy this.
Yeah,
instead.
there is a mental element to like a savings account, definitely. Like, you know, just even the name, like. You know, I know that's for something that I can't touch right now. You know, that's like a last resort, you know, fund.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I definitely, I have one of those. I have an account that I put a little money into every month and I try to forget it even exists.
Yeah.
With the hope that, you know, I monitor it from once in a while just to make sure it's not like a victim of fraud or something like that. But I don't even have a debit card for it. It's literally just an account at another financial institution that I dump some little money into, and then I let it ride. And I did dip into it one time last year, and it was really handy to have it.
Sure.
You know, available to me, you know, at the time that I needed it. But then I then after I used it, I was like, okay, now that doesn't exist again. You know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, good stuff. So, anyway,
happy holidays.
Yeah,
Jinx.
You owe me a Coke. Yeah, happy holidays to you, and we are definitely in the midst of it now. I consider the holiday season anytime between Thanksgiving and New Year's. So
yeah,
it's a long gap. Which right now we're kind of in that little like lull, but it's still the holiday season to me. So yeah. So I hope everything's great for you.
Hey, you too. Stay warm.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
This podcast focuses on having valuable conversations on various topics related to banking and financial health. The podcast is grounded in having open conversations with professionals and experts with the goal of helping to take some of the mystery out of financial and related topics, as learning about financial products and services can help you make more informed financial decisions. Please keep in mind that the information contained within this podcast and any resources available for download from our website or other resources relating to bank chats is not intended and should not be understood or interpreted to be financial advice. The hosts, guests, and production staff of Bank Chats expressly recommend that you seek advice from a trusted financial professional before making financial decisions. The hosts of Bank Chats are not attorneys, accountants, or financial advisors, and the program is simply intended as one source of information. The podcast is not a substitute for a financial professional who is aware of the facts and circumstances of your individual situation. Thank you for listening. Please check out our full library of episodes, which can be found on the AmeriServ.com website. You can also download or stream the podcast from your favorite podcast app.